I was working with a recent client and did some story work for them, and they asked me, would I help them with a pitch deck, with a pitch presentation? And I had to explain to them that I don't really believe in decks, in presentation packs, and also don't really believe in pitching. At least not the kind of pitching that salespeople often think of. They think of like Shark Tank or pitching to an investor. Pitching to people who only have money to invest. The vast majority of us salespeople, we're presenting and talking to people whom we need to engage in a conversation about whether or not we can help them with a problem. And pitching doesn't do the job. But what about decks? Well, if you give salespeople decks, what they typically do with them is stand up and present them. They love to present things like this. And this is our company. This is our mission statement. Let me tell you a little bit about our history. This is us. And well, here are our values. And here are some of the clients that have bought stuff from us. And let me tell you a little bit more about us. It's not very engaging, and all of your competitors sound the same. So that kind of pitch for sure doesn't work. But I learnt very early on, more than 20 years ago, before I was even a proper salesperson, I was in technical sales, and I got to work with our best salesperson, and we were trying to persuade more than 40 UK oil and gas companies to put all their data in our database in a collaboration, in a consortium. And at that time, the oil companies sure didn't want to share their data in a database. They were very suspicious of that. But it was John's job to go around all of them and persuade them. And I got to see how he did it. He did put a slide up. He would stand up. They were expecting a presentation, assembled senior executives with their arms crossed mostly, to put up a title slide. They knew what the presentation was about. They were against it. And the first slide that John put up, the first proper slide, looked something like this one. Had a list of problems on it. And John explained to them, he said, you know, we've been surveying some of your peers and we've assembled from them this list of most common problems and issues to do with data in the United Kingdom in the North Sea. Looked at it again. He said, you know, I was chatting to the CEO of Amerada Hess, mentioned him by name, and he looked at that list and he said to me, John, if I can tick all 10 of those boxes, do we get a prize? And the audience laughed. And John said, what about you guys? How many boxes do you reckon you can tick? And they started answering. And John immediately sat down. He just pulled a seat, sat down, and we had a conversation about the kind of problems they were having. They would ask a few questions about how that would work in the new national database, and John would get up, put a slide up if he needed it. But the pitch was not a pitch. It was straight to a conversation. And what I say is that if you have a pitch, its objective is to get you as quickly as possible to a conversation. Now, John told a little story in that pitch. He said that he was speaking to the CEO of Amerada Hess, and he said what the Amerada Hess CEO said. Now, that little snippet of conversation allowed the audience to infer something about John. He's the kind of person that speaks to CEOs, and CEOs open up to him. That's a very interesting aspect to that story. John passed his credibility in that tiny little bit of story. But his real skill was engaging them in conversation and judging what they really needed and what features had to go in this database and what would it take to get them on board. Well, we signed 43 operators, oil and gas operators, for the very first database. Was launched back in the early 90s, still running today. It was an incredibly successful series of non-pitches. So I encourage you to think about the stories that you will tell that will show that you're credible and that will get you to a conversation about the problem. because that's what a sales presentation is really all about. I wish you well with it.